Hey, what's up guys? Today I'm going to be showing you how to get massive sounding drums with these two tricks. Now the first trick I'm using, you guessed it, is parallel compression. So there's two ways to set this up. We can either highlight all of our close mics that we want parallel compression on. So usually I like to just only do the shells. So I'm highlighting the kick, snare, and toms. And then I'm going to add all these to an effects track. I have a keyboard shortcut set up for that. I'm pressing Shift, Alt, and F. And that's going to create a send on all these tracks to an effects track. So here we're going to type in our effect. So I'm going to look for a very aggressive compressor. This supercharger is really good. And we're going to call it P-Comp. So I'm going to make this purple for now so you can see it. Right here's our P-Comp down here. So on all those highlighted tracks, it just created a send and it's sending to the supercharger compressor. So now let's pump in some compression. So there's two rules of thumb with parallel compression. You're either trying to add sustain or you're trying to add punch and attack. So with this supercharger plugin, it's really good for adding sustain. There is no attack and release controls, therefore we can't really make it add punch. But if we just listen back to this, you hear how it's squashing those transients and really bringing up the sustain. So when we pump the compression up like this whole channel acts as a sustain knob for the drums. Let's hear it in context. So as you can hear, as I bring up that fader, the sustain of the drums is just shining through. So this can really help us out with our drums cutting through the mix. Hey guys, if you want to see more in-depth content like this, consider subscribing to my Patreon. I create bi-weekly uploads that will help you write better riffs, mix better songs, and overall create better music. If this is something you're interested in, you can find the link in the description below. Now let's talk about if we want to add punch to our drums. I'm just going to load up a Pro C, and we want a slow attack with this. So I got this around 30 milliseconds. Release around 120. Now we're going to dial in the compression. And keep in mind, since we're blending this parallel compression track in with the dry drums, we can go pretty crazy with the amount of compression. So you can hear how punchy that's making the drums. That's exactly what we want. So now I'm going to solo the drums and let's add that in slowly. So you can hear on this track, when I bring up the fader, it's adding a really sharp front end attack onto every drum hit. So if your drums are lacking punch instead of sustain, we can just bring up this fader to add more punch in. Now I'm going to show you the way I like to do my parallel compression. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this parallel compression track. And what I'm going to do is send all my shells to a shells bus. So I'm going to mark that purple down here. Here's it soloed. Now I'm going to show you my favorite plugin for parallel compression. It's the Schoeps Parallel Particles plugin. And it's basically like a 4-band compressor / exciter. So sub is our lowest band, thick is our low mids, bite is our upper mids, and then air is like our top end. So I'm going to start with all these down, and then I'm going to start injecting some of these knobs in. And a little quick hack for this plugin. If you want your snare to really rip through the mix, turn up the bite knob. If you want your kick to really shine, I'd turn up the thick knob. But I also like to add a bit of air and sub as well. And I typically like to set my sub frequency around where the kick fundamental is, so around like 50 or 60 hertz. So let's hear it with the plugin off. And now on. So this plugin is the best of both worlds. It's basically adding sustain as well as adding a nice front end tooth attack to the drums. So that's the first trick. Now let's talk about the second trick. It's our best friend, reverb. So if you want your drums to sound massive, they need to have quite a bit of sustain. Because if we think of massive sounds, if we think of a building exploding, they go on for a long time. That's why they sound big. if you're in a dead room with a dead snare and the snare rings out for 0.001 seconds and sounds like, then it's not going to sound massive. And one of the best ways to add depth and size to your snare is by sending it to a reverb channel. So what I'm going to do is just highlight my snare and I'm going to hit Shift Alt F. It's my key command to send it to a new effects track. Then I'm going to find a reverb I like. Let's go with the IRL. I'm going to name that snare verb. This is a convolution reverb. So it's basically emulating a room or a space. I have it set to room 1 and I just hit the impulse reset. So I have the RT60 set to about 0.9 seconds. So let's hear what that sounds like. Already it sounds huge. Let's try bypassing it. As you can hear, it's just adding so much more depth and it's damping a bit of that high end as well. Really makes it sound beefy. With the reverb time, you don't really want the decay going past 1 second. You can maybe get away with it on a slow song, but on fast stuff, it'll just cloud up the whole mix. So I usually keep mine from about 0.5 to 0.9 seconds of decay. Now on my snare reverb track, I usually like to EQ as well, so I'll take out a bit of that fundamental because it tends to build up when you put reverb on a snare. So I'm ducking out some of that 180 to 200, and I'm adding a little high shelf just to boost all the high end. And an even bigger hack comes into play with routing. So if we send this snare verb track to our shells bus right here, then it'll be getting parallel compressed with everything else. So that snare reverb track is also getting the added sustain of the parallel compression group. Let's do one last before and after. Without these two tricks, now with these two tricks.